Chapter 6. Monika had spent the last few days unloading and arranging the various plant and animal samples, their tags, notes, drawings, and rock samples that I had gathered during my time near Lake Königssee. She had set up in a small row of four unused officers' quarters on the grounds of the royal house, along the western wall. She had divided the materials into four groups, the smallest being the rock samples, which she stacked on shelves in the little bungalow where she also stayed. The plant samples, associated drawings, and uses were another group. The insects make up a third, and the mushrooms, molds, slimes, and similar organisms comprise the fourth. The Metternisches had left the day after me, and she was alone, save for the groundskeeper, the cook, and four guards who now resided in the guardhouse at the front of the walled compound in much newer accommodations. She usually ate breakfast with them, sometimes lunch, but always had dinner at the pub across the road, located on the whole first floor of the little hotel. After the third day of this, she had decided to not only eat supper there, but also to take advantage of the much more comfortable bed in the hotel. She mentioned that she might sleep for 2 days, estimating the weight of the materials to be about 2 tons, which she had unloaded, sorted, and grouped over the last few days. She closed up the doors to the rooms with materials and locked them. Then she went by the guardhouse to inform them that she would not be staying tonight and exited through the single-person gate, waving goodbye to the guards. Waiting on a carriage, a horse, and cart to pass by, she then crossed the street looking forward to a good meal and a good night's sleep. She had enjoyed traditional shepherd's pie in England some years ago, which she had kept as a secret, and last year had helped the cook in the magical half of the pub make it quite well. That's what she was hungry for. She went in around the back, where the entrance for magical folks was located. It was behind a bright lamp post which stood in front of a small bay window on the left side of the hotel's lobby, on a wooden panel that looked like it had been painted black 1,000 times, and was exactly the size of a door. Over it, on the rock exterior, was the name Bavarian Baker. Only the magical can spot it. Their bakery skills will be put to use tonight for sure. She conferred with the baker and the cook, who told her there were quite a few people who have requested it as well, and also enjoy it, even if only when they are here alone. She sat at the small table in the corner, not, by coincidence, at the same table she had last shared a private moment with me. She waited not long and had her supper with a glass of red wine. All this time, facing the shimmer wall, back to the rest of the bar, exhaling long and regularly, both from the meal and the thinking of my family's present difficulties. The chair where I had last sat with her was pulled out by the top, dragging the floor, and she looked up at the presumptuous, lady. She was tall, perhaps 2 or 3 inches taller than herself, with long, very straight, and very black hair. She was dressed in black, perhaps velvet, with off-white silk ruffled cuffs peeking from underneath her full-length sleeves. Her whole blouse resembled a gaudy, overly elaborate military style, complete with gold epaulets and excessive garish. Her pantaloons were also completely impractical and tailored to her slim figure out of a similar velvet-like material. Her boots spoke the same way to her, overtly and garishly wealthy. Spit-shined, high-laced with silver adornments and a rider's heel. She had obviously not ridden here on horseback, but had dislocated. Not a speck of dirt or other dust about her anywhere. "May I join you, miss?" she said, smiling like a cat clicks at a bird. "Miss Binder." Monika stared right through her, disdain dripping openly. "I have concluded my dinner and nearly my wine for the evening, so conversation will not distract me, please." Monika gestured to the chair the lady had already pulled out for herself. There was an inch of wine left in her glass, and regardless of what she may want, Monika could easily finish the drink and mark the end of whatever was to come. Monika was not gifted in the art of an empath or divination at all. However, No gifted nature was required to determine that whoever this woman was, there was clearly nothing she couldn't acquire if she wanted to. "May I have your name?" Monika asked. "Of course, my dear. My apologies. Countess Runetta Lynchos," she proudly stated, glanced down, and then seated herself. She removed her right glove, snapped her fingers, and her own cut-lead crystal wine glass appeared and filled with a whirlpool. She had a strange, almost wooden-looking ring on her second finger, with a small Celtic knot of silver set in its head. "Impressive, with that wand, no less," Monika remarked plainly. Another display of skill or spending that most could not dream of. Not sure how she did it, and being interested in magical skills and materials, she dared ask, "How is the magic done?" "Oh, my family is some of the most gifted magical craftsmen in the human world. We are trying this new design." She held out the hand with the ring, picking up the glass and sipping from it with her left hand. "They are caretakers of the oldest enchanted stand of woods and its gifts in all Europe, you know." She withdrew her hand and regloved it. "I have heard of your family. I'm pleased to meet you. What brings you to, well, this particular pub and this particular table, may I ask?" Monika cut to it. "Well, my dear," with condescension, as she was no older than Monika was, "I am not an exceptional worker of exquisite crafts, as you may have guessed, nor am I content as an exemplar of royal heritage and duty in all social requirements that entail. I am, however, quite the purveyor of antique crystal balls, and even instruct the gentry whose female companions are requested to learn the discipline, for the benefit of, you know, all." Another drink, which smelled to Monika like port. "That being said, I was able to see visions as a young lady amongst assorted things which made no sense and seemed to be pointless. Painstaking journaling, and years later, it was revealed that my main gift weren't only remote seeing with the crystal balls, but seeing things that invariably come to pass up to 10 years in the future. They are usually disconnected in a way, and the less in focus they are, it seems, the less relevant to human affairs they turn out to be. Yet, not a month ago, I saw you. You were sitting in that chair, speaking to someone whom I could not see, and even stranger, I couldn't hear anything the two of you were saying. That has never happened to me in all these years. As you might imagine," smiling broadly now and looking right at Monika with her beautiful green eyes, arms crossed and elbows on the table leaning forward a bit, "it piqued my interest." Monika could sense a charm was being attempted on her. She was able to break eye contact for a second, and indeed, Runetta was gently rubbing her ring with her thumb. "Now, Miss Lynchos," Monika began. "Countess Lynchos," she corrected, and sat back in her chair, both hands flat on the table. "That is quite rude, if I'm honest. Why would you attempt such a thing?" Monika demanded. "Ah, my Miss Binder. Monika, if I may. We cannot know if it works well without giving it a try, can we now?" "Runetta, that is impolite indeed. You could have easily begun with your knowledge of me, and I would have enjoyed our discussion more. As it stands, I am not clear of your intentions beyond amusing yourself with testing your divination skills on me as I work on my daily tasks." Monika took the last of her wine, making it clear she did not want to continue this conversation. "I do apologize. I admit what my class of peers do amongst themselves is not acceptable everywhere." She reached over and touched Monika's glass, and it refilled itself. "I will leave you with your thoughts, dearie. Do excuse me," she said, and with a sly smile she stood up and turned away from the table, snapping her fingers, and her drink disappeared. Then she, too, dislocated. Honestly, it shocked Monika. The arrival, the gall, and to be perfectly honest, the sass of whatever it was that woman was doing, or wanted. Her mouth may have been partially opened with amazement for a moment or two after a twist to the left, and Monika swept her glass abruptly up and huffed a bit as she drew a sip. The huff and sip showed it was indeed port, but oh, also magnificent. She happily carried it upstairs to her room. It seemed prudent to report what had just happened to Clement and also to Professor Templeton. So she sat and wrote each of them letters, slipping them into her inside jacket pocket, which hung on the bedpost, then turned in for the night. Back in Texas, Don brought Artyros back to my house. He had some information, but was unable to make it to the mission to meet the priest. He handed me the letter written by my father, and I assumed that we might have to go together. There was a contingent of what looked like Mexican army marching south, escorted by quite a few armed men, not in uniform, marching through the night. None of the army's prisoners, I'm guessing, were armed, and they were all tied together. Roughly 60 men were guarded by a dozen or so. They spoke about the provisional government paying these men to escort the group to the southern Brazos River, where a barge would take them south to be returned to Mexico. The speed at which they were moving, I couldn't enter without being seen. As I watched, they stopped at the gate, and 6 of the guards went in, staying for about 15 minutes. Then the group started off again, just before dawn was about to break, so I came back. Artyros stated. He sat down at the table, and Mom brought him some breakfast and tapped to refill his coffee. I used my monocle several times, and other than small flocks that could not even be mineral traces of ores used in magic, I did not discern any strange traces between here and there. Mother cocked her head, listening, and sure enough, Father began slowly, but his coughing increased. Both of us headed upstairs and opened the door. He was sitting upright, so we went on in. I sat at the end of his bed. Mother pulled a chair right up to him. She had her kettle and a cup of her special honey tea, which she gave him right away. He got a couple of timid sips in him, and he sat back to breathe as best he could. Son, have you spoken to Father Kelios yet? He forced out. No, sir. It was impossible to visit so far, as others were around, I told him. Rather worryingly, he obviously had no measure of time, as it had only been a few hours since we last spoke. Mother pulled his shirt sleeve up, and his whole arm was now blackened. She immediately pulled the button neck open and looked. The dark branches were up to his collarbones, and all over his sternum. It made me sick and angry at the same time. Mother made a tisk sound and frowned when she realized it was larger than it had been earlier. Mother, Raileanu, I have to tell you, I can feel I do not have long left. This I can tell now is older than anything I have ever heard of. More coughing and exceedingly labored breathing. It is making it hard now for me to breathe evenly. Whatever it is not malevolent. It appears to be functioning as intended. Whatever this is, it is not of the ordinary world, nor, I believe, of ours. It must, however, be our world that solves this riddle. He was very serious in his eyes now, quite out of breath as well. He closed his eyes, wincing in pain and clutching at his chest, and fell asleep again, still grimacing, exhausted. Mother, I whispered, can you create an aura jar now for Father? I felt compelled to ask if the time was truly close. I hated to ask after it came out. She was clearly trying to avoid thinking about how bad it was. Yes, yes. Let me get what I need from out back. She rose and intended to run downstairs for her supplies, but I held her arm, hoping she would stay with Dad. No, please, stay with him. I remember what is needed. I will retrieve them from the porch cupboard. I ran downstairs, through the kitchen, and out the back door onto the porch. The porch was made of sandstone set in dried clay, with cedar posts and beams, and featured the same split shingle roof as the rest of the house. It was the whole width of the house and maybe 20 feet deep. Mother's little herb boxes are scattered about. To the right, as I went out the door, down the whole length to the corner of the house, were her cabinets and workbench where she grafted plants and created new varieties of flowering magical plants. I needed things from practically every cabinet. Cloth made from empress flowers, goldfish scales, and sparkling cattails. I found everything, including the cylindrical jar, about 10 inches tall, with a cork stopper. I went back upstairs and arranged them on the bed for her. I went back downstairs, as this process is usually undignified, private, and sometimes quite bright. I felt as though it was something which needed to be done to give her a moment of purpose, so she didn't have to concentrate a minute longer on his painful passing. I found Artyrus speaking with Professor Templeton's portrait. As usual, I can only hear his side, and the portrait is a stationary painting as far as I am concerned. He turned to me and asked, "The professor is asking how your father is." "Not well, sir. He doesn't feel he has much longer, to be honest. I have gathered the things needed for my mother to make an aura jar, so his condition may be studied later by appropriate experts, if we cannot find the cause ourselves," I told him. After a moment, Artyrus relayed to me, "Excellent idea. Several I have spoken with are intrigued and disturbed by all of this, and none has the wherewithal to think of it." "Well, sir, I had good teachers. Mother will relay his aura into the jar regularly, so the process can be catalogued," I said. "Hopefully this is not something any of us must deal with again." I sat down with a thought on the bench at the table. Turning my head, I looked at my father's chair for a moment, thinking about sitting in it. That one brief thought nearly broke me into tears, so I shook my head to throw it out. Artyrus said he had some things to discuss regarding his stay here, including the tasks his uncle would be assisting with, and he would call me if anything else came up. So I returned to the backyard, since I couldn't help my mother. I spent many days here in the backyard with Mother and Father, Ma and Pa, as I called them when we were alone, helping build the garden, weeding it — that was my job when I was younger — and I, in fact, looked forward to the menial chores they gave me when I was little. I felt important when I witnessed my parents performing a task that seemed complex, one they entrusted to me. Sitting there, I saw numerous sprigs of grass and weeds among the squash and corn. I got down on my knees and went to work. The beans were tall enough and had wound around the corn, so I knew any new ones that had begun wouldn't make it to maturity before winter. So those went out as well. I learned a great deal from my task as a little boy weeding the garden. When Mamma had made new beds, we had to pitchfork the hard ground and work up all the prairie grasses and weeds, root and all. If we left one, it'd spread and drop seeds, sometimes before we'd notice. The first few times I recall, I would pull with my little fingers and hands, removing only the blades of grass or leaves and stems, leaving the roots intact. It looked good to my young eyes. No weed. It was done, right? I wasn't strong enough to pull the roots out of many of them. But no, Mamma told me it wasn't good enough. and was patient enough to wait 3 or 4 days to show me they had grown right back. Whereas the ones we had managed to pull the whole thing on were completely gone. From that one lesson, Mama used patience and proof, and I started trying to use a pitchfork to loosen the soil enough for me to pull them up. At that age, I was too young to use it, of course. That is how Mama showed me that I was not strong enough, no matter how hard I tried to do some things. To have a clean bed of soil for a good crop of vegetables, I would need some help. I wrestled with it for some time that day, before finally asking her to do it so I could do a good job pulling the weeds. Her job was pitchforking, mine was pulling weeds. She taught me to worry only about my job, not someone else's. A month later, she showed me the corner where we had left the weeds, and the plants we put in were much poorer, struggling for light and nutrients against the faster growing and ground covering weeds. I understood why it was an important job they had given me. Those plants were made smaller and produced fewer vegetables than the well worked and weed free areas. Some years later, I realized the lesson was also for my whole life. My life was a little patch of earth that would constantly and naturally have invasive things move in around the edges, which stole energy and vitality from me. I couldn't leave them or push them away when I felt they were a problem. I had to completely remove them from my life. It was as true in my whole life as it was in this little garden I was weeding again. Mamma hadn't had time to do any of this, and I was occupied for a good quarter of an hour when the wind changed and I caught the distinct smell of no, several goats. We had never had goats before. I stood up and dusted the good soil back into the bed off of my hands and took the weeds to the far corner of the house, and sure enough, found 3 adult pygmy goats, a brown buck, 2 does, and 3 adorable little young'uns. They were white with a black saddle mark and parallel dark lines on their heads, from snout to where the little hairs stand up around their little nubby horn sprouts. The babies, probably 4 months old, started jumping sideways and making their little cries of excitement. Mom had them in a pen made of woven willow, which stretched the whole right side of the house, with a trough for hay and a bucket of water, and a little lean-to. Generally, as long as they can stay in the shade in summer, dry and out of the winter wind, these little guys can make it through all of Texas's weather. They're rascals sometimes, but also very intelligent, caring, and each has their own unique voice and personality. In fact, I haven't come across any goat, wild or domestic, that wasn't its own unique individual. It felt good that Mom had another growing family to care for, especially now. I grew to all of 6 feet, stout and broad shouldered, with my dark olive skin shaded by years in the surrounding wilds in the sun, wind, and humidity of this land. And glad for it. The lessons, even in this small homestead, and the hard work my family embraced gave me a strong base that served me well after my accident. I do not recall my parents using magic until all the actual work was done. Making a hearty meal or having the fiddle play music, perhaps, but everything's around cultivating, raising, and collecting foodstuffs. We all did by hand together. No doubt some of the gray hairs peeking out above my ears and my brown hair are due to it. Mama used to say every gray hair was a moment that shaped you, that you survived, and that you have a lesson from. She was all strength and lessons now. The lines on her face from a lifetime here, every one, beaten back by the force of her smiles to be at the will of the smile, not the land. I was back pulling weeds when Arcturus came out, looking bewildered at me down in the dirt. Professor Templeton said Monika met a strange lady who was asking about you. Her name was Runetta Lynchos. Do you know her? I stopped and leaned back on my toes, placing my hands on my thighs and taking a moment to think. No, I don't believe I have heard that name before. Professor Templeton said she is from the Glauer family in Bavaria, obscenely wealthy owners of most of the wand-making wood in Central Europe. Eccentric, but almost certainly a harmless visit. Just wanted me to tell you, he said, sitting on the bench at the edge of the porch. What are you doing? I'm weeding Mama's little garden. She clearly has been busy with my dad, and I didn't want it to overgrow while she is occupied. This was my job when I was 3 and 4. I was finished with the big bed, so I dusted off and stood. As I looked at him, I spotted a small plaque above the back door with a large circle carved and burned into it, featuring an R in the middle. Huh. Wonder what that is. It was on a saw-cut slab of cedar about 1 foot in diameter and 2 inches thick. Let's go back in and see if Mama is all right, I said. She was coming down the stairs as we came through the kitchen, the aura jar in hand. He is asleep again. All right. Glad he's able to rest. Mom, what is that circle R thing above the back door? I asked. Oh, your father made it when you graduated. He said that, as well as you had done, as hard as it must have been, it was like you circled the wagon and held on to the end. That's the circle of wagons around our little R. She then held up the prison keys, which he was strong enough to disenchant, so that was a good sign. She motioned for them to come to me, so I took them and hugged her. Artyrus didn't understand the term circle the wagons, so I explained it to him, and he nodded, agreeing that it made good sense. Actually, since they will move the prison soon, likely much sooner than planned now, we thought we would call our little homestead the Circle R Ranch, she said, setting everything down on the table. Suddenly, 3 loud knocks on the door took us by surprise, and we all looked at the door and at each other. Mama, pursing her lips and shrugging her shoulders, started toward the door when I motioned her to stop, that I would answer it. I opened it to find a tall, wiry man with a black hat, a colored canvas shirt, a black unbuttoned vest, a long tan duster, and still wearing his spurs. He had a long, bushy gray and brown handlebar mustache, several days' worth of chin whiskers, and both a Colt pistol slung low with a slot in front of his holster for his wand, and a Henry rifle in his hand, muzzle down. He had his big, dirty hat in his hand. It was an old family acquaintance. Howdy, pardon the intrusion. My name is Bartholomew Corden, looking and pointing his hat at Artyrus. Magical Ranger of Central Texas. I believe we received a request from the warden here a week or more ago to make a visit. May I come in? He stated plainly in a polite, gruff, territorial tone. Of course, please. I stepped aside as he switched his hat into his left hand and came in. Here, have a seat. I pointed to the other end of the bench I was on. Nah, son, I'm a mess. I do apologize for the delay. I'd been set to keep an eye on that caravan of Mexican prisoners. Motioning to Artyrus with his hat. The one that you looked on earlier. We got word in Bexar that them young fellas escorting him was the son of one of them men killed in Goliad. He had designs on killing them Mexicans first chance he got. That sort of behavior just won't do in current circumstances, what with tensions being so high all around and all. They asked me to see if it was no trouble befell them prisoners, with them being so far out of reach once we heard about it. Sure enough, after you flew off this morning, he must have lost his temper and patience for vengeance, and set to shooting those fellows. I made sure none was hurt, and put the lot of 'em to sleep, and took that boy back to Bexar where he could be kept an eye on by his own. The rest of 'em are back awake and marching south as we speak, safe and sound. That's kept me occupied since your letter came in, and I hope my delay wasn't troublesome," he explained. "The fellows in Bexar were supposed to reply and ask if that was all right with y'all. The delay, I mean."
No, sir, no letter of delay reached us,
Mom began, now a bit unsettled. "Well, shoot. That ain't no good. Apache and Comanche have been shooting owls when they spot them carrying correspondence. I have tried for over a year to get that darn magical impresario to stop using owls. I told him it's best to use them red-tailed hawks, but I can't seem to shake whatever hooey he learned at them darn Spanish school out of his head. I am sorry about that," he said, shaking his head, looking at the floor. "Is Mr. Tellafrog still poorly, ma'am?"
Yes, much worse. I don't hold any hope he can beat this ailment.
He looked at me, and I refused to offer any hope either. "And no idea what he might have got into that caused it?" he said, looking around. "Nothing in the prison or from a prisoner, you think?" "No, sir. We went in yesterday and looked it over quite well with a goblin-worked monocle. We didn't detect anything of note." I looked at Artyrus, who was nodding in agreement. "Ma'am, may I check on him?" he asked quietly and politely.
Of course, this way.
She beckoned him upstairs. They proceeded upstairs and pushed the door closed behind them. "Artyrus, I trust him. He has been the ranger here for over 30 years. I have never known him to be anything but forthright, so we should let him do all he can. He is clever and resourceful, and may, without knowing our purpose, be of great help." "I trust you and your family. Should we tell him about Father Callius?" he asked. "My bet is he already knows. He was right there, but the magical rangers are few. I think less than 10 in the whole country here. How much he can do may be limited by the priorities." I stopped when I heard the door open again. They came downstairs, both looking grim. Mother was shaking slightly. He put his arm around her shoulders on the last few steps, saying, "It'll be all right, Mother. Don't fret."
Well, boys, it doesn't look good.
"I reckon he has little of a day left in him. I haven't seen that before, whatever it is. This land is full of old treachery and magic we don't have a handle on yet." He put his hand on his whiskers, stroking them as he thought. "Granddad said one time they'd come across a little Apache medicine woman, not 4 feet tall, who had sickness and an illness of some Spanish soldados. In those days, the Spaniards weren't careful with the punishment of them they thought was magical folks. She wasn't magical, but worked her people as a natural healer. He'd said she were burnt to a crisp and strung up when they came across her, in that order, hanging over a white rock alcove somewhere up north near Vernon, I believe. The fellows she'd had gray ashy streaks on them, but they were dead in a day, and I don't recall anything about it being a drawn-out process, like none of it spread the way it has on your daddy. The only thing I remember Paw saying is that the little cave camp was burned up too, all except a little piece of root that looked like it was made of tar. Granddad never experienced anything magical in any of it, as I recall." Mama poured him a cup of coffee, and we could tell he was trying to remember something else that might explain things as he sipped more. Ma'am, that's some good coffee. Thank you very much, he said and set the cup down. I was authorized before I left to give you as much as $100 in gold coins to help with the illness, as I see you require. I'm satisfied that you've done all you can, all of you, and it seems there isn't much else to do but love on your husband and father best you can. I'm willing to give you that $100 now if you can make uh. Barthou was snapping his fingers and squinting, trying to recall the word he wanted. Orajaw, that's it. For him that we can take back to, Bayah and keep in the vault, so we can begin building a library of ailments. And maybe find a source and prevent this in the future. Our records are pitiful, as you may imagine, but we gotta stop somewhere. And with a better man than your husband, I can't imagine. He drank a few more sips of coffee and continued. It can't be much more plain than that. It's a damn shame. If it's all right, I will set up my little tent in the front of the prison and stay here to look after y'all. I have but one talent of magic that stands out. It is stone carving, and if it suits you, I'd be honored if you'd let me craft this great man a tomb of the stones that surround your place. Of course, Bartow. That would be so kind, I said. Mamma began to well up with tears, shaking more, so I went to her and she sank her head into my chest. I said we should go upstairs, and we did. We sat with Dad, who didn't open his eyes again. It is difficult knowing these are his last days, the last moments with a parent, trying to absorb all of the person you've loved, and at the same time, knowing the mortal body you're watching fail isn't the man you knew. It is the last of them, showing what many of us face in the end, hurting, losing all you were, weak and frail. With his occasional wincing, I tried not to think about the pain he must be feeling, and instead let my memories go back to when his father, my papa, passed away. I think I was 5 or maybe 6 years old. I didn't understand. I was only confused about why I couldn't see Papa anymore. My dad, the great man he was, bearing his own suffering about his father, sat down with me and told me this. When a horse-drawn carriage is crafted by skilled artisans, it's beautiful, ornate, gleaming with brass and gold, featuring purple velvet curtains and offering a fine sprung ride. Yet, it's just a box. God makes us the same way, with care and unique accents, beautifully individual. But just like a carriage, after time here in this world, it becomes so worn out that it can't be repaired anymore, and it cannot carry people anymore. So, just like a carriage, the joy of life is who we are, not what carries it, but who is in it. When a special person like Pawpaw steps out of his carriage, the carriage may be empty, but Pawpaw's in a new place. We'll see him again. Pawpaw. I only remember one time with him. We had visited Beaumont to see him when I was even younger. 4, I think. He was pretty thick around the middle and always happy, laughing at everything from finches pooping on his porch to a man falling in a puddle after the rain. He warned me once when I was going out back to the outhouse to keep an eye out for the turd snakes. He said they love little boy poo. If you think they're nearby, you'd better stay very still and quiet. Darned if that man didn't drag a 4-foot piece of old, rotten hemp rope around the outhouse with a string, which, from the gaps in the boards, looked very much like the infamous turd snake. I stayed in that horrible-smelling excrement sauna for an hour terrified of that turd snake. My dad rescued me, admonishing his father, who was so consumed with laughter he couldn't breathe. Later in the day, Papa came to apologize. I was in his backyard, stacking small rocks to make a cave. The day before, I was using the same pile of rocks to make a mountain. Papa said, "Oh, boy, you'll build a mountain just to tear it down and move it the next day." I looked at him, confused. I was simply making things I imagined. Then he called me to come sit with him on the back steps. He apologized for the snake joke and said joking around is okay and good for the soul, as long as it didn't hurt anyone. He hugged me and I told him it didn't hurt me, but I wasn't sure I'd believe anything else he told me right away, if that was okay. He found it hilarious. He told me none of us gets to pick who we come from, but the gifts they give us are in there somewhere, poking at my belly. We have to find them all, like a treasure hunt, and figure out how to use them well. However, we can choose who else to learn from. I tried hard to make sure that your Nana, your mom, and your dad are good teachers. Listen to them. I thought about what he said for a long time while I was building with those rocks. Probably was pointing out how much work I was willing to do that ultimately ended up being pointless. It bothered me forever, like he let slip something he didn't like about me. I didn't change because of it. I think now he was admiring how I would do whatever was needed, regardless of how difficult it may seem, even when I had to then undo it. Regardless, if I decide I need a mountain today, one I shall build. If it gets in the way of what tomorrow needs, then yes, I'll take it apart. Dad began to reach up with his hand, and Mom grabbed it right away.
"Honey, are you there?"
she asked nervously.
"My beautiful bride, I love you so much. Is our little frog here?"
His voice is very raspy now. Yes, Dad, I'm here. Dreadfully.
My little honey dog. Take care of Mama, will you, yeah?
Of course. Don't worry, Dad. Even at 35, I'm not ready.
Son, don't dwell on any of this. There will be much to do.
He strained and smiled a bit, eyes still closed.
I can tell it's time for my carriage to stop and me to depart.
Now, this is too much for me, given all I had thought of, and I gave up on holding my tears in. They fall all over me, and I just let go. Head down, I stay only for my mother and fumble over to wrap her up in my arms. A few moments of breath so low only I can detect it. Mom had his hand so tight she could tell when his heart gave out. We both know now. I only stayed for another minute or two, and I squeezed her. She pats me, saying it is okay, and she stays beside him, crying. I stood up, using my sleeve now to wipe tears and such, and looked at Mama. She fell on Father's chest, clutching him tightly and breathing more deeply than I had seen in a long time, for the sole purpose of crying harder. I'm gonna step outside, Mama. You call me if you need me. I stopped at the door and wiped my whole face with my handkerchief, stuffing it in my back pocket and heading downstairs. One look at me and both our guests stood, nodded, hats in hand, and walked out into the front yard. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Mom and Dad fed me as a baby, where we ate the food we all worked to grow. The earlier wiping was wasted, and it started again. I grabbed my mug and poured some coffee, but my stuttered breathing made me shaky, so I set it down. I spot the 5 1-ounce $20 gold coins on the table nearby. I look out the front window, and Artyrus is helping Thou put up his tent and things. This is not at all what I expected to deal with when I received the letter about my father not feeling well. It made me angry. In fact, the intentional lack of information, those stupid coins sitting on my table. I understand their purpose, but right now, it looks more like a heinous, hateful stack of metal loosely related to my father dying so fast, and for a cause no one can explain. I swept my hand across the table at them, flinging them across the room, each one making a ding sound, as gold does when it's struck. It was a childish gesture, one a person with little self-control might let loose. I didn't care. I wasn't going to look at them anymore. When I had finished admonishing myself, I realized I had still been uncontrollably crying, and the whole area below me on the table was wet with tears.